Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. Today I'm going to finally get back to the transaxle for the Ford mower, and I also do a little bit more work on the front axle. Okay, so here's all the parts of the transaxle, and I've decided that I am going to try to move ahead and end up using this one. So what I have here is, I have this parts diagram that I found, so I'm going to be able to use this to try to put it back together. And then once I'm able to get everything kind of laid out back in the case here, then I'll know for sure what parts I need to replace and what parts I can fix and that sort of thing. Okay, so I've got this mostly back together now, just kind of laid out and everything. And apart from the bearings on either end of this shaft here that I already showed you were ruined, a couple other things. This bearing right here that holds the axle together is pretty much completely seized up. So I'm going to try to open this up and see what's wrong inside with it. It's probably a bunch of rust, but I'm going to check this out. Okay, so actually all that ended up being wrong with this bearing was the grease that was inside of it had kind of congealed and hardened, so that's why it wasn't turning. All I did was spray some of this penetrating oil in there, and that loosened it up. So now it actually spins pretty nicely. Of course, when I actually use this, I'll pack new grease in there and clean all this old stuff out. But for now, I'm just gonna keep it like this where I'm laying the parts out. So that's good that I don't need to buy a new one of these. Okay, so other than those few bearings that are messed up, this is the reverse chain here that goes to these two sprockets. This is pretty seized up in places, so I'm gonna need to replace this. And there's one other piece on this right here. You can see when I take this bearing on the end is fine, but in here there's these two washers, and then in between them is this, what used to be a thrust bearing. You can see all the bearing pieces are just completely gone. So I really don't know how necessary it is to have this thrust bearing right there. What I'm probably going to do is just make a brass bushing to put inside of there in place of this. I think that'll work out fine. So. Okay, so now you can see right here I got that brass washer back in there, and I think that'll work just fine. That's something that's easy to replace if it does wear out, so I'll just keep an eye on that once I'm using it. But all in all, I think this transaxle is going to work pretty well once I fix the ends of this shaft here and then get new bearings for that. But let me show you one thing I'm going to do in the meantime while I'm waiting on that. Okay, so while I'm waiting on the parts for the transaxle, as well as the pulleys, I'm going to revisit this front axle here. As you can see, well, maybe you can see in there, I made a brass bushing for this bolt to go through, because the original one was just plastic and that wasn't going to work. But what I'm going to do is take that brass one out and remake a new one out of steel that covers this whole length of the bolt here, because the one in there doesn't take up all this space in there. So I'm going to remake a new one that takes up that whole space, and then weld these two pieces together more completely. You can see this axle here is just two pieces of pressed steel that's welded in a few places. So I'm going to weld that up more just to make it stronger. Okay, I got the axle back in here now. It's so much better than it was before. It's much more sturdy. It doesn't have a lot of play in there. It's under a good bit of tension under this thing here, between here and there. It's kind of like rubbing against this part up here, which should be fine as long as I put some grease in there. But eventually I also might reinforce this tab here, since it's kind of under a lot of pressure there, and it's pretty thin, so eventually I might do something with that. But yeah, that's pretty much this. The transaxle will be ready to go once I get the couple parts in, and then once I get the pulleys and then belts, I can start figuring out the clutch system and the whole drive system in that. So anyways, I'm really looking forward to completing this and actually getting this riding. I think it'll be a lot of fun. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.